Yo, what is going on? So this is a 23 Grimrail depot on Tyrannical Bursting Storming Week. So first things off, you want to start things off by pulling this 3-pack over here along with the Shrouded guy, and kind of just make sure we're keeping close attention to the Technician. So the 500,000 volts that it does, you can interrupt that with any type of CC or kick. That's not super important. It will stun and it does cleave a little bit. The more important thing is the activating on the Iron Star. When it activates on the Iron Star, you want to make sure that you use a real interrupt on it, otherwise it will just start recasting. Once the Technician's dead, I go ahead and I come over to the left over here and I just hug the wall and I pull the next pack that's towards the boss. You can normally do it without pulling the 2 that I got there on the side, but if you've got anyone following you, generally that ends up getting body pulled. So just be careful, because that means now you've got 2 Technicians to deal with. So, from there, I kind of tank them over in that square over there that I was in. Unfortunately, I had to come out to help with interrupts, but normally if I just got the 1, I'll just stay in that square behind the Iron Star at the top right-hand corner of my screen now. That makes it really nice because the Overseers will just kind of keep on going into both of the walls there, and you don't have to worry about them flying out any other location. This is another spot that works, but it's not as safe because they go through the Iron Star a little bit. So with this, again, just make sure that you're watching kicks on that Technician and just trying to point the lines towards the wall so that these the Overseers aren't going all over the place. Just so you know, sometimes it'll target someone else that's in your group, like a melee, and it looks like it's going at them, but it'll still go at you even though the line's not connected to you, so just kind of be careful of that. And also, be aware of those sleep puddles. They are sketch. So, after this pull is done, which on a Fortified week, you can use Lust on it if you want, or use Lust on the boss. I generally like Lust on the boss, but some groups, if it's a high Fortified key and they're doing a double pull like this, they'll just Lust on this pack, because it is kind of dangerous on Fortified higher keys. But from here, you can go to the boss, just hug that wall next to the box. You'll see me do that here in just a moment. And then from there, you've got a choice. You can either do the 2 Shrouded mobs and then the boss, or you can do the boss and then the 2 Shrouded mobs. To get the Shrouded mobs through the gate, what you have to do is actually stand just left of the gate, and then jump up in the air, and while you're in the air, you can taunt or use any of your ranged abilities like Chi Wave to pull those mobs. So just so you know, that's how you do it. If you stand on the ground, it doesn't work, but you want to be just to the left of the door and jump, and you'll be able to pull those. I choose to go with the boss here because it's, you know, not a huge deal. Some people like getting the Shrouded stats, but hey, it is what it is. So with this boss, just remember that the stomp that he does do quite a bit of damage. If your healer's not paying attention, they might silence themselves because it does silence, and just kind of be ready to go back and forth with the boss. The big thing that I like to do is make sure that when the other boss jumps up on top of the boxes, I'll just put this guy in position right away so that it's in a good spot. Now, once he gets hit and jumps down, you can see there's a debuff on the guy. He actually takes increased damage, so that's when you generally want to have your group Lust and just kind of hard target that guy down. As soon as it's finished, you can unmark him, especially if he's super low compared to the Brute, and just kind of keep on pulling the Brute back to wherever he moves to. Now, you'll notice I'm making good use of Chi Torpedo here, and I save it for right after he jumps away, and then I'm also taunting the Hulk right as I'm Chi Torpedoing. The reason for this is because, as a Brewmaster, our taunt increases the movement speed of the enemy that we taunt. So it just means that he's getting over there a little bit faster. So each time, again, I'm just, you know, switching back to the small guy after the Brute runs into the boxes that he's in and stuns him. And then don't forget to, during that intermission where he's up top, your group's going to be taking more damage. This is on some cases where you'll want to actually just like be helping heal with Vivify. So sometimes I'll just sell Brew and I'll just off heal. Other times I will use like the Aegis Trinket and again off heal. So there you can see I didn't pull him over to the guy that time just because he was a lot higher than the other, so I wanted to kind of get some more damage on this. Now the important thing is that the small guy who jumps around, you want to make sure after the 3rd time that he's up there that you get him to 15%. As long as you get him to 15%, he will no longer jump on top of the boxes, and from there you can just focus the Brute. But you definitely don't want him to die, because if you do, the Brute gets a stacking and rage buff, and at that point the second stomp that he does will end up killing everybody. So you can see now that the Brute was so much higher, I'm leaving him away from the small boss. That way we're having a chance for the health to kind of get down to equal. And then once they are equal, then I pull them back together. Now, after that, obviously we've got our Shrouded guys that we can take care of. You can do both at the same time. I generally just make sure that I pull Zol first, and then I will use Crackling Jade Lightning to pull the other and taunt it in, and then just make sure that you mark the mini-boss, Zol, or Zug, however you want to say his name, so that he's getting killed first. Generally, this isn't too bad. Most healers can handle these two together, but obviously make sure that you're not going into sleep pools, and try, obviously, to make sure that you're not getting hit by the frontal. Pulling it in this order, the frontal should never happen at the same time that the other boss is doing his shield, so it shouldn't be a big deal, but do make sure that we're watching out for those bats. Remember, with the bats, we can use Paralyze, and we can use Leg Sweep to take care of those, but if you try to use things like Ring of Peace or any movement abilities, they don't actually stop the bat, they just move them, so he'll continue casting. Now, one of the things to kind of keep in mind here too is if you're doing this pack second, make sure you're holding on to your defensive CDs. You are going to need your defensive CDs for the next two mobs because they are the hardest hitting mobs in this entire dungeon, even compared to bosses. The other thing to keep in mind too is that the floor in this next area is bugged. So if you're on the ramps, you're fine, but if you're on any of the platforms, the mobs, when they go to do their cleave ability, or not their cleave, but their bleed ability on you, they will actually target someone who's on the ramp. So you can see I make sure that I keep on moving around. If you stop on any of those platforms, you'll end up where they do something weird and they will target other people. So you want to make sure that you position yourself still on the ramp, that way they don't target other people. I don't know what's going on with the platforms, but like our warrior in the past had told us that like he's thrown down his Spear of Bastion and it just goes through the floor. So I think it's something weird with how it works. It's like somehow line of sighting, or it's counting it as being on the bottom. So I don't know, but just make sure that you stand on the rails or the ramps instead of being on the platforms. Now, the bleeds that these guys do, like I said, they hit very hard. So this is something that you kind of want to try to avoid using cooldowns at the beginning, because you also get a stacking debuff that increases their damage. As time goes on, that's when you start using more. So start using Cell Brew, start using Fort Brew. Don't be afraid to use your Kyrian Vial. If you're a dwarf, use that to dwarf off the dots, because they just hit so hard. Alright, next pack in here, the Gunner in here is the only deadly mob. You just want to make sure that you point him away, and as soon as he starts his shrapnel cast, you can move. You can see I don't wait for it to finish, I just move. As soon as he starts it, he won't reposition, and so you can kind of just keep on sidestepping back and forth, and hopefully the Shrouded guy doesn't point his frontal at you or put a sleep cloud underneath you. After that, you can go into the next car, and the next pack has a Cinder Seer in it. Now the Cinder Seer, you can see I marked it with Skull here. This is a mob that you want to make sure that you're using CCs, so Paralyze, Leg Sweep, Ring of Peace, something like that, to stop its Flame Tongue. So that's its Flame Tongue. You can see right there I just used Paralyze on it. If that goes off, it puts a fire circle underneath where you're standing, and it's pretty big, so it's like a 4 or 5 yard circle, and it does a fuck ton of damage. So you just want to make sure that you move out of that if it does come out, but ideally you just use Paralyze, then Leg Sweep, and then Paralyze again to make sure that it doesn't cast. It does have like an 18-second cooldown. You can see it there on my weak aura that tells me it on the right side of its nameplate, saying that it's got 18 seconds. So Paralyze, Leg Sweep, Paralyze will always work for that one. Now the pool after this is kind of annoying because you've got two gunners in it and it's really close to the other mobs, so I tell my group to LOS and stay back here, and what I do is I just kind of run forward and I'll either use Chi Wave, Taunt, or Crackling Jade Lightning to just pull one of these mobs, and then I'll come back in and LOS with them. And the idea here is to get the gunners over and then come around them on this part here. And then again, that's because they're both going to do the shrapnel. If you stay LOS, it'll make it so that they don't just target people and start shooting, and ideally then they're in sync with their shrapnel, so you only have to move once. If they're out of sync, then you need a little bit more room and you have to dodge a little bit more. So, but other than that, the other mobs in here aren't too bad. It does do quite a bit of AoE damage when they throw grenades, but that's a healer issue, not a tank issue. So the next pool in this one has a couple deadly mobs. It's got the Hulk in it. It's not a good time. These boomers will do kind of like a frontal, kind of like the next boss does, and so I like to generally place them like against the wall and then take care of them that way. There's also, like I said, the Hulk in there. It gets an increasing stacking and rage, so hopefully if you've got someone who can soothe, they are soothing that, hopefully on like every 5 stacks. If not, just be ready to use defensives as the fight goes on. But with these boomers, you can see they're putting circles underneath you as the tank, and you're just going to kind of go back and forth and move out of those. You don't want to move towards the end of the train because there's more ads there. And I generally just try to go like back and forth on the sides here. That way we've got enough room, and if we run out of room, I can always run towards the train car that we just came from. So, if you've got a Soothe for the Hulk, you can kind of, once it's the only thing left, you can move into the next pack, or you can finish it off. The next pack is kind of dangerous because it has a gunner doing the shrapnel. It's got 2 Cinder Seers, and it's got a boomer putting stuff on the ground. So, the thing here is to make sure to mark the Cinder Seers. You still want to try to make sure that you are stopping their flame tongues from getting off, either with leg sweep, paralyze, or ring. Preferably use leg sweep and ring because then it hits both of them and stops them, but you still also want to make sure that you're pointing the shrapnel blast away from melee. Oh, and also don't forget the gunners put fire underneath your feet too. Oh, and so do the Cinder Seers if they're casket off. So just make sure that you are being careful with that, moving around, using full use of this entire length of this train as you need it, because ground effects bad. Don't let your group die. So, this next boss has its 3 kind of phases here. Ideally, you want to try to just save your cooldowns during the first part. You don't really need to worry about it. He doesn't do a whole lot of damage here. He does target people and throw, you know, do the cannon mortars at them, but it's actually targeted on the ground. So a lot of people don't know this. You can just sidestep it, and then it'll keep on doing it where it started. It won't actually follow you. So idea here is just to make sure you're spread out from the rest of your group. I generally go in this back corner right here, and then, you know, just make sure you're giving your range and melee lots of room to move around. But again, save your offensive and defensive cooldowns because phase 2 of this as a tank is actually the most damage intensive and the spot where you're going to need the most threat generation. So saving things like Weapons of Order with your extra Keg Smash, saving things like Zuin, or not Zuin, but our Ox is going to end up being much more beneficial. You can see there I actually did pop the Ox, but that's because I had Weapons of Order up. So generally, I like to pull them all the way up here and tank in between the front 2 cannons on this left side. Generally, it works out pretty well. I try to mark the boomers with X and then also square, or you know, any other marker that isn't skull, just so that people know like that's the priority target. They want to make sure that they're killing that and then picking up their bodies. If you do mark them when they die, their body will stay marked. So it helps the DPS who may not know what's going on, know that they should go and pick up that body. So ideally when they pick it up, on Elv it's really nice because I can see who picks it up. You could see the debuff was on the warrior there, and then he could jump in the cannon and shoot using the number 2. So if you weren't sure and you need to explain it to your group, they want to pick up the boomers, jump in the cannon, target the boss, and press 2, and that'll shoot them, doing 33% of its health. The rest of the ads, they drop fire that you could get in the cannon and shoot with 1, and it does like AoE damage to anything in front. But it's also nice to save that because it does a massive amount of damage to the boss when the boss is up in phase 3. And then there's also grenaders that you can pick up their grenades and throw them at the mobs or at the boss. Do whatever you need to do. But you can see it's kind of hectic. I'm getting knocked up by tornadoes. There's fire, and you know the ads spawn irregularly, so you kind of need to be ready to group them all up. Now, if we didn't need Ring of Peace, this might be a good dungeon to use Black Ox statue, but Ring of Peace is way too good in this dungeon, so Black Ox is definitely not worth it just for this one boss. But ideally, as soon as those next 2 boomers, which spawn at the same time, come together, both of your melee will hopefully grab it, get in the cannons, and shoot the boss with 2, getting it down to 1% health, and then hopefully they go and finish it up, or you can run over and Touch of Death the cannon just to get it taken care of. My monk ran over there trying to kill the boss and killed himself, so that's something you want to avoid doing, obviously. But yeah, so just definitely make sure that you're taking care of these ads and kind of hanging on, finishing off this boss. Luckily, I am an engineer, so I was able to res this guy before the fire came out, and the boss is going to come down here in just a second. So once the boss is dead, ideally you want to stand directly between the two cannons that I marked with diamond and star. This is because the other debuff that you pick up off the guys and can get in the cannon and shoot with one, this does massive amount of damage to the boss. You can see the warrior on my details. They've actually fixed this on details now, but you can see just how much damage he's doing. That's actually just the cannon. So the cannon just does, it melts this boss. So you can see anytime you can pick those up and get in there, it's going to be ideal to shoot it. Now, unfortunately, our warrior earlier was shooting the ads with it, which is nice because it kills the ads, but it's definitely way better to use it on the boss because the ads aren't super difficult to deal with. Now, please be careful as you're running to this last train car. This fire seems like it shouldn't hurt that much, but it literally will destroy you if you touch it. Even if you get if you just move a second early, it's like the flame cannon in Workshop. If you get hit by it, it's going to kill you. And here's a good example of that right now. Look how much it did to me in 2 seconds, and I'm dead. So, don't be like me. Don't go early. If you just wait for the second one that's on the left there, you can make it the whole way with just roll. I mean, you can run normal speed, and you'll make it just fine. Now, this last train is generally the spot where my groups seem to experience the most amount of difficulty. Now, it's super easy to just tank these two up front, take care of making sure we're kicking that storm shield because it does a lot of reflective damage towards you or just damage from attacking it. But a lot of groups, for some reason, the melee love to run to the end of the car where all the other mobs are, and the captain will literally just kind of destroy your group. It does a massive cleave that if you don't move out of, it does a massive amount of damage. So ideally you tank these far enough back and wait until this first Farseer is dead, and then move forward and pull the next group. I don't know why, but dealing with the infiltrator, the shrouded guy, with the other mobs, it seems to just cause a whole lot of issues, so it's easier to just take care of these first two first, and then you can pull pretty much everything else. There is another Farseer in here, like I said, and then the captain is the other thing that you need to watch out for. So the slash that you just saw go off, and you saw the warrior's health drop to half, that's literally, this is tyrannical, okay? It's not fortified. On tyrannical, still hits for a lot. On fortified, it will just one-shot people, so especially on higher keys. So just be very careful of that. So even as a tank, you do want to either use a defensive or just move out. You can move just 5 yards and it won't hit you anymore, but you do want to move away from the captain whenever it's doing its slash. And generally, I'll kind of hold these, and once the seer's dead, then I'll pull the rest of the stuff that's at the end of the train, because you can kind of deal with both of those. So you can see that shaman just got hit by the slash there, and it did almost his entire health pull. So again, please be careful of that. Try not to tank it near the ranged if you can, which is ideally why I don't like to pull it with the other group, and just, play safe. Alright, so once that group's done, this is the end of the fight. Just make sure that you are trying not to line yourself up with any of the other people in your group as the fight is starting, and you're tanking the boss, because then you have less likely of a chance of someone getting speared accidentally. But basically just kind of move around, avoid the blue marks on the ground, avoid the traps. If you do get hit by a trap, you can still use abilities, you just can't move. If you're someone who uses Tiger Lust, when you get into the trap, you can just Tiger Lust yourself and it'll remove the trap. Or if you've got a paladin in your group, you can have them freedom people. But, those aren't deadly to us, though they are deadly to the rest of your group. And just kind of move around and avoid, obviously, like I said, the blue swirlies and the lightning. So ideally here, I should have went towards the back of the train, but I was close to the front, and you can see, I don't know what our hunter was doing, but she stood in the lightning or something and ended up dying. But again, make sure that you are, after, it seems to be that the spear always comes right after the breath comes down, so it's when you're moving around, so just be careful about that. But other than that, I'm just going to kind of let this play out, because there's not really much more than I can say about this fight than what I already have. One other thing that you might notice after each of the breaths after I move is that I do taunt the boss. Again, that's because Provoke gives a 50% movement increase to whatever target you use it on. So after he throws a spear, I generally will taunt it so that it comes out of the lightning faster. So that's really the last thing I'll say here. But this fight is in the bag. You can see we end up 2-chesting this, which is pretty nice. But yeah, I've got more content coming. I've got some beta coverage out there as well, and I'm going to continue to do that. So if you are interested in those things, make sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget, if you've got any comments, put them in the chat. I'll make sure to answer them. Any comment that comes through, I do put a response into. So whether it's questions about what I did here or requests for future videos, you can put them there and I will check them out. But anyways, that's it for me. I will catch you in the next one. See you guys.